The clap. Greetings, everybody. I am Kathy L. Murphy, the Pulpwood Queen, and I'm reporting from Barbie Land here at Holly Lake Ranch Boarding Clinic, which is a minute from my house. Because when we had the ice storms, all of the trees got hit by lightning and started falling, and I've lost internet at my home. So I normally do this now at the University of Texas campus library, but they're closed for Martin Luther King weekend, the one weekend that because the school starts on Tuesday, the one weekend that I do this event. So we are here with one of my favorite authors who is the most gracious and lovely people I've ever met. Lisa C. was one of the authors that when Random House sponsored my Beauty in the Book show, she was one of the authors that I interviewed, and I was flown to Beverly Hills, to California. I know it was really swank. And Lisa picked me up. She picked me up and we went to Pasadena. We went to the Pan Asian Museum. We talked about her latest book was on the beautiful girls and her Chinese American heritage. We went to her cousin Leslie's antique store, which blew me away. I still have my little tiny cloisonne boxes that I bought there. It's the only thing I could ever afford. And we had a book club at your home, and I'm telling you, her home had more precious things in it than the Pan Asian Museum, which had some pretty amazing things. But it's the only time I've ever been to a book club in my life that we had valet parking.
No, we didn't.
Yes, there was.
Oh no, because there
There,
were only five of us. It was a very
there was somebody parking their cars, and I remember you let me. Well, maybe I'm wrong, but you let me wear that 400-year-old embroidered silk Chinese thing, and I was so petrified because it should have been in a museum. And you cooked this lovely dinner on the most gorgeous plates from your family's restaurant, Chinese restaurant. That was the place to go back in the day in Hollywood. And I'll never forget it as long as I live. It was amazing. But you're here with us now because you have a new book. And
well.
I'm really, really excited about it because you have continued the story. I went back and read all your previous books on Gold Coast and up through the years, and everybody knows Snowflower and the Secret Fan, but you've got a new book. And I don't have them with me because I didn't want to lug all the 50 books up here. Thank you, Lady Tan's Circle of Women. And you have the most gorgeous covers. Is all the art done by the same person?
No, because I've had, I think now, five different publishers. So they've been, every publishing house has their own art department. But this particular jacket, I just think is so, I'm going to hold it up again just for a second.
I
So
just want to frame it and put it in my house. And I remember when we went to the museum, I bought a beautiful poster print that I still have hanging up in my home and a kimono. And I really was torn on getting the little shoes. But then it just that just has haunted me for years about those shoes. And you can talk about that. But right now, let's begin with the background of your family literary history in California, because your mother was an author and she wrote a lot of books. And just Carolyn your mother was famous and so you grew up in this literary community. Tell us first a little bit about your background and how you just grew up with it. So I'm really curious for everybody to hear what you have to say about it.
well, first of all, thank you, Kathy, for having me, and thank you, everyone, for being here. I lived with my mom when I was growing up. Today would have been her 90th birthday. And I actually just posted on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter about her, the very cute photo of the two of us, but also, she was a writer. And so there was a moment when she won the LA Times, I think it's you know, Lifetime Achievement Award kind of thing for writing. And they did this beautiful video of her reading from Golden. And so I just put that up on Facebook.
Oh, can I share that to the Pulpwood Queens when I get home tonight?
Yeah, I mean, it's only like 2 minutes. It's just lovely. The Times did a beautiful job, but to hear her voice is just this incredible, incredible to have that. I feel so lucky. But anyway, my mother was a writer. My mother's father also was a writer. So I'm third generation. And so much of what I do is, stuff I learned from them. I did find a letter that my grandfather had written to my mother that's it's special collections at UCLA. I was doing some research. And she was just in college, and he wrote to her and said, if you want to be a writer, you have to write 1,000 words a day. And of course, this is what my mother, who also taught writing, would tell all of her students. It's what she herself did. It's what I do. It's what I tell people who are aspiring. If you want to write, you've got to do 1,000 words a day. You can't do 1,000, do 500. And, that's how you do it. You got to put yourself in the chair and do the work. And so I really was very much inspired by my mother. Our writing styles are completely different. What we wrote about, completely different, but definitely in terms of the day-to-day work is, I feel like I had a lifelong apprenticeship. And, sometimes I joke around and say, well, it's a good thing they weren't plumbers, but I couldn't have been surgeons. And then
That's a pretty good profession these days around here.
my father's side of the family is Chinese. And, my parents were married very young. They were divorced very young. And I think because of that, and they were both in school, they didn't have anyone to take care of me, couldn't afford anybody. So I did spend a lot of time with my grandparents. And I would go to work with them in Chinatown and all of that and work be with them in the family store. And when I was a kid, I probably had about 400 relatives here in Los Angeles, about a dozen that looked like me, the majority still full Chinese, and this little spectrum in between. And so, how is it that we identify ourselves? It's the people who we see around us. They're our mirror. They're the ones who tell us who we are. My mom's family was minuscule compared to that. And so when I was a kid, what I saw around me were Chinese faces. What I experienced was Chinese culture, Chinese tradition, Chinese language, Chinese food, as you know, Kathy. And that's why I write the kinds of books that I do.
Now, I've forgotten, do you speak fluent Chinese?
My family spoke the Saya dialect, which is one of 1,200 dialects in Guangdong province. And when I was a kid, I could understand a fair amount. Now, all I really remember is food. And then I studied Mandarin for about 4 years, and I got pretty good, actually. On one of my research trips, I was able to get around perfectly by myself. But the minute I stopped studying, it went just right out of my head.
Do I remember you went on a trip with Amy Tan? Was it several authors that went? Yes, yeah, that was.
It was just the two of us, and it was when she was doing research for the Valley of Amazement, and I was doing research for Dreams of Joy. And so if you read those two books together, we were staying in the same village, in the same house. And so you can see this village and the house, but we both had kind of a different, it's in a completely different time period, completely different story, but the village itself and the house in both books is really quite recognizable, if you know what you're looking for.
I will have to do that because I love to read. I had two Coco Chanel book authors one year, 2 separate years, but the different takes on it, it's just like there's Jeffrey Lawrence Matthews, who's my co-host. He, his specialty is Civil War, and there's so many Civil War stories, and each one I think they can't write another book, but then they're great. So there's, it's just like all the television shows on attorneys and hospitals and doctors, and I said, well, why can't there be more than one story on a beauty salon bookstore or something, and they say, well, that's just so niche. And I go, well, I don't know, there's a lot of hairdressers in this world. So but anyway, so Why don't you tell everybody about your process? Now, the one thing I know about your house but was because I did a makeover on you, and every drawer in your house is meticulously curated. Everything in your house. She has a perfect home. Okay, puppy, get down. She has a perfect home, you all. And I was so taken with it's built like a U, and then you've got a garden in the center, and you can look out of her bathroom or the side room at the end and look across to her husband's office. And it's kind of eerie to see somebody walking over there. And I remember asking you at the time, have you ever looked over there and seen somebody that wasn't your family walking in your house? Because it's that you had. So anyway, it's a beautiful home. And all those white orchids. Oh, it's my favorite flower. It was gorgeous. So anyway, but talk about your process of how do you get up every morning, have your coffee or tea and get to work, or
My tea right here.
yep.
So, yeah, I get up every morning. I come. This is my office. This is not my husband's office. This is my office at the far end of the house, the one you were seeing through to. And the yard is right there. It's gorgeous. And I come in here, and usually I spend about an hour answering email. I have my personal email, but I also have an email that people can write to me through my website. And, I'm very accessible. And so, I get to hear from a lot of book clubs, can I join in on Zoom? And I have all kinds of information I can give them even if I can't join in. So I do that for about an hour, and the exercise room is behind those screens, and so my husband's usually kind of huffing and puffing in there, so I wait till he's done to work. And so a book typically takes me about 2 years. The majority of time is spent on the research. The least amount of time is actually the writing, and then somewhere in the middle is the editing. Yeah. And so, when I'm writing, as you already heard, I write 1,000 words a day, which is just 4 pages. That's not very much. Sometimes I can do that in about 2 hours. Sometimes it takes me 8 or 10. But I keep a notebook with my daily amount of words. And there are times when I'm at 983 times wanting to be done, but I will sit here until I get to the 1,000. If it's that hard, I know it's probably not very good. If it's going smoothly and I just rip through it in 2 hours, you're in the zone, right? It's working really well. But I really feel it's important to just keep doing the work, because I can always fix it, but you can't fix something that isn't already on a piece of paper, right?
Right.
Something that doesn't exist.
So, and can I ask if you outline first or not?
I do have an outline because these are historical novels. I really have to kind of, first of all, follow the history and be true to the history. And so I start with about a 7-page outline that's just pretty general. That's what my editor looks at. And I just feel it's really important for us to all be on the same page about what I'm working on. And then as I start to do the research, I find things that I think, oh, I've got to use that, right? I use that. So I start, and then it's a matter for me of well, where does that go? Is it in the beginning, the middle, at the end? What's the ripple effect? So those are things that I start adding into my outline. And then I would say that when it's at about, this is just rough, about 45 pages, then I know I can start to write. So then I take that first bit, that we'll just, if a book, most of my books aren't divided into thirds, but we'll just pretend, I'll take what's the first third, and maybe that's only 15 pages, but that's my working outline for the first part of the book. Let's say the first 100 pages. So it really helps me, and I think of an outline in this way, that there are certain things I can't move. Certain dates, certain events that are historic, like I said before. And so those are like signposts along the way that are unmovable. And then there are those things that I find in Lady Tan's Circle of Women, there's a thing that happens with a worm. I won't give too much about it away, but there has to be a setup for that. So those are little things to when you get to the kind of culmination of that scene of the worm, that are also little signposts along the way. And then there are the things that really just have to do with your characters, like two people have to meet. Maybe they're going to fall in love. Maybe they're going to get married. If they're going to have a baby, that's typically 9 months. So those also get along the way, right? And I have some flexibility with that. So then when I sit down in the morning to write, I know where I'm going. I know where I'm going towards that signpost. I don't know how I'm going to get there. And that's the creative part, is I know where I'm going, but then the story starts to unfold as I write.
Wow. And I'm sorry, I've got the book at home, but who is the publisher of the Lady Tan's?
Scribner.
Scribner. Well, wonderful publishing house. Okay. So I just presumed it was the same. I've gotten so that I don't look anymore, because most books are, not published by the major houses like they used to be, that I received. So that's good to know. Scribner's a great publisher. So anyway, this book came out, what date was it that it actually released?
June.
Yeah. So did you do a book tour? Are they doing that at all anymore?
Book tour.
No.
I mean, it was, I think I was out 2 months on the road for this.
Oh,
and
wow.
I know now that's very rare.
It is.
Far fewer book tours just generally, and usually much shorter book tours. But this was a big one. This was a really big one, and I think they send me out because
there I am.
Not everybody's good on the road, but I may or may not be a good writer, but I'm pretty good on the road.
Well, you were an excellent driver when you picked me up in Beverly Hills. It kind of just, just a small town Kansas kid. I was living the life when I was with you. That was really a big thrill for me. So I know everybody's going to have questions for you, because, if you have not read all of her books, I have. And I'm telling you, each one is a gem, a jewel, and they're standalone, but yet they continue the story, So anybody have any questions for Lisa about anything to do with publishing or writing, or comments?
May I ask this is a kind of a selfish question, but I remember a quote from Dragon Bones, and I apologize because I read it a long time ago, but it was something about whoever controls the water controls the world, or something like that. And
you're right. I don't remember the exact phrase, but I did write a series of mysteries for those of you.
Mm-hmm. And it related to the Three Gorges Dam, and
that had the Three Gorges Dam, and artifacts that were going to be flooded. And Chinese history is very long. It's 5,000 years old. And so there is this saying, which again, you said it pretty well. I wrote that book probably 20 years ago, but the person who controls the water controls the country, controls the people. And that's been true in China for thousands of years. But couldn't you also say now, in this time when, I live in California, we've had this historic drought of 800 years, that this is going to be an issue for all of us moving forward, no matter where we live on the planet. And I've been thinking about that quite a bit lately, because we see these extremes in weather, and huge amounts of water one place and no water somewhere else.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to ask you about was, I'm working on a book about Tibet, set in the 1890s, and it's the intent is to foreshadow what has happened since China's takeover, which has been pretty dreadful. And I think a lot of what drove China's interest in Tibet was water.
Mhm.
And I wonder if that's a perspective you share. And given your background with China, what's your sense of what is going to happen to Tibet?
Well, I don't know enough about that history to know if water was an issue there, but I can tell you that India gets all of its water from the Himalayas. And
Right.
this, for example, there wasn't enough water. I mean, there's like not even enough snow at Everest. You know, it's just so that water goes to a quarter of the people on the planet.
Right.
And if that dries up, that's going to be really significant. But I'm sorry, I just actually don't know enough about the history, sort of
That's
the
okay.
history
Thank you.
or what's going to happen.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I live here on 3 natural spring lakes, and they have a Nestle's water plant. Yet they've sold off the water to the cities around it, and so we're always on water alert. And here we are. I have a spring that runs right across the road in front of my house and down a ravine, and I think, well, I know where I can get water if we lose it. But it is interesting. Water is that important. And so, what's the most interesting thing that you found, Lisa, that stands out in your mind in your research?
Can we let Carol ask the
Oh,
question?
sure.
Hi, Lisa. Carol Vandenhund here. It is such a thrill to have you here. Thank you so much for sharing your process so generously. 2 quick questions. One, because I'm moving from contemporary and I'm actually going to be writing my first historical fiction, it really struck me when you said most of your time is spent on the research. That's so if you want to illuminate that a little bit. But actually, I have a specific question about Asia because I'm thinking about the period in which I'm going to write. Could, there are things that we shine a light on that aren't positive for the Chinese government. And I'm curious how your books have been received in China and if you've ever gotten any negativity from the government or from people, Chinese nationals.
Yeah, so my all of my early books were published in China. Actually, the earliest ones were all pirated, but then eventually there were legitimate publishers who were buying the rights for them until Dreams of Joy. And Dreams of Joy had as its historic backdrop the Great Leap Forward. And so, since that time, I haven't been published there. Then for Tea with Hummingbird Lane, there was a publisher, and then that actually got caught in, if we go back in time now a while, remember when Trump first became president and he had the embargo against China. And so China, of course, retaliated. And one of the many, many things that were in the embargo was the publication of a lot of books that had been bought by Chinese publishers, American books that have been bought by Chinese publishers. So I actually have the translation in my computer. I have the jacket, but at the last minute, they weren't able to publish it, which was just like a political thing happening way up here that had nothing to do with me. But that said, there are all kinds of translation programs in China. And so I bet almost every week I get a request from a student asking if they can translate a chapter from a book, or one of the books that hasn't been published there because they can't translate something that already exists. And so, I'm always, as long as I can see, oh, yes, they're in a legitimate school and whatnot. And, this is just a class project. I'm always happy to do that. But what that means is my books are available there. They can get them there. It's just they aren't all of them available in Chinese. I feel like I've been very lucky, whether it's the Chinese American community or in China, that my books and my writing have been very well accepted. I think a lot of that has to do as it's really kind of an outgrowth of my first book on Gold Mountain, which is a nonfiction book that tells the history of the Chinese in America through the eyes of my family. And I think that that gave me kind of a that book is going to outlive me, of all of my books. That one will, there are others that have sold more, but that one, it's taught in universities and things like that. And no one could write that book today. So it is unique in that regard. And so I think that that did give me kind of a stamp of approval that has helped me over the years. But your very first question, I think I answered the other two, but I can't remember the first.
Oh, just illuminating how you spend that time doing the research. I'm not sure I had allotted a full year to just do research when I was thinking about my own timeline.
I think a lot depends on when a story is set, right? So let's say it's
I'm actually looking around 1960, so the Great Leap Forward when you're talking about that. Yeah, after the communists took over.
Right. So, the thing is, the more recent you are, the more that's available, for one thing. There are lots of books written about cultural revolution. There's not a whole lot out there about the Great Leap Forward, but it is out there. You can find videos, you can find photographs, you can find paintings. There's so much more that you can find that if it's recent, even though it's historical. Now, with Lady Tan's Circle of Women, that takes place 500 years ago. Well, how many movies have you seen that take place in China 500 years ago? So I'm really starting with a kind of a blank canvas. And then you really think about what did people wear? What kind of makeup? They did have makeup. Like, what kind of makeup did they use? What was it made out of? Who made it? How did they style their hair? How did they heat, their house? How did they get water? Going back to water. I mean, how did you get from here to there? Even if you were just going to a neighbor, how did you do it? Especially if you had bound feet. How did you get from, in this book, Wuxi to the capital, 1,000 miles on the Grand Canal? How long did that take? What were the conditions like? What was the weather like? So you're really, building an entire world, but in that instance, you don't have any photographs. You only really can rely on paintings. And what was written in that time or what's been written about that time. So it's much more limited. And the closer up in time you get, the easier it is, just because you have so many other types of sources to use.
Yeah. Well, we're running out of time. Unfortunately, I could listen to you forever. Where would be the best sources for them to read more about you? Like, can you give us your website and where are the best places to get, maybe autographed copies of your book?
So I have a website, www.lisac.com. It's very thorough. I have something called Step Inside the World of whatever that particular book is that gives you all kinds of historic information, stuff you can use in your book clubs, all kinds of stuff like that. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram. And then for an autograph book, actually, I've just let people send me a note and I will an email or something, and I've just been sending out signed book plates. I think is pretty easy. There's a bookstore, an independent bookstore near me that a lot of people order books directly there, and then the bookstore calls me. It's called Diesel Bookstore in Brentwood.
Diesel. Wow, that's good to know. Okay, well, very good.
And it's a way, and they're always happy to put a book aside for people and send it out.
Well, I cannot thank you enough for being with us through all the little, trauma and everything that we had. Thank you for being here for all of us and for sharing your writing process. Keep those books coming. Do you have another idea in the works that's going to...
I was just on vacation for 3 weeks and wrote 60 pages. So,
woo!
yeah.
That's amazing. Well, I'll be watching and I'll go on the website and check everything out, as should all of you. Now, if you want to post anything on the official International Pulpwood Queen page or on the Pulpwood Queen Presents, I will approve it. And so people, if they have any further questions, or if they go to your social media, you're on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and they can ask you further questions. But thank you again. I'll be back in touch because you are, well, actually, you are our January lead book. So we're really thrilled about that. On the video last night, just so you'll know, I introduced every single month's selections and authors, and the list is up on my website, and so people can copy and paste and print it out. And so I just want everybody to buy your books, keep these books coming for all the authors. And thank you so much, Lisa. You really have made the best memories of my Pulpwood Queen life. So thank you very much. And I tip of my tiara to you. So thank you, and have a wonderful writing life. Okay.
Thank you for all you do, Kathy. You're just amazing, and you're such an inspiration to so many people. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Well, you have a wonderful day. And next up, you guys, is Catherine Casey with her new book, Angel Falls, which will be at 3:15, set in Venezuela. So it's our international read. And thank you so much. And I'll be in touch. So thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
We'll see you in a bit.